Hey guys. How about now? Good morning. Are we on the board? Little more. There we go. Hello, everybody. Good morning, and glad you're joining us here live and on Facebook and YouTube. Glad to have you in the space. We had a little bit of a technical glitch before we got started this morning, so we are finally going in a nice flow. So, pleasure to be with you. We are in a place here on Sunday mornings at Unity Church with the intent to open up to the inner essence of reality or spiritual truth, God consciousness. And the way that we work with these teachings is we are looking at them in a way that blends the essences behind the forms. We find the hidden unity in the multiplicity. So what perfect environs to do it in. Unity Church is really the exemplar of finding this deeper truth hidden behind the appearances of all traditions. And so we want to recognize that what we're doing really is not just some kind of intellectual enterprise. This is something that will allow us to open these hidden doors and unlock these shackles within the mind so that we can find our true nature, which is the immediacy of our awareness. So when our awareness lights up with divine light, we will begin to recognize that we didn't really see before. We talked about this last week, that when we go through this personal initiation into higher consciousness, we cross over a threshold from being little children to being spiritually mature. This is the process. It's a divine evolution or maturation. And so we do this by degrees, by stages, by grades. But nevertheless, once you set your foot on the path, it's kind of like you're in an airport and you're also being moved along. You could walk on that treadmill or that conveyor belt and move along faster. But just know that once you have the intention, once you make that effort to open up to the inner truth of who you are, your feet are now on a path, and that life will move you. And you'll notice this, that if you start to look around, your intentions are being reflected back to you through the situations, the events, the people in your life, that everything becomes the guru, as we often say here. The path is the guru. And so if we're paying attention, we will begin to wake up to these hidden nuances and subtle cues that Holy Spirit is giving us through the forms. And so forms are serving a very important function. They are frameworks in which we can develop this higher awareness, our body being one of the main frameworks that we are working with, or forms. And it's a framework for developing this ability to undergo this spiritual evolution. So the body is to be honored. It's to be recognized as a learning device, as it says in A Course in Miracles. But if we confuse our identity with our learning device, then we're in a very unfortunate situation. It's kind of like identifying yourself with your car. You're just not your vehicle. The vehicle is very important. We all needed our cars to get here probably this morning, barring the minor exceptions. But the vehicle is not the driver. And this is a distinction that's brought out in these teachings. And we're going to be looking this morning first at a couple of stories, and then we're going to use those stories as springboards to explore the teachings of Vedanta. Many of you probably are aware of Vedanta. It comes from India. It's part of the Vedic tradition of India. And so there's a lot to be shared and learned from Vedanta. But first we want to actually draw from the Sufi teachings presented by the popularizer Idris Shah. He was teaching in Europe and in America in the 1960s and 70s, and he brought the Sufi teachings into a more popular audience. And he does tell a really helpful story, which really kind of bears on what we're doing here this morning and what we do here every week. And he mentions it as the story of Anguru Zumi Nab Staffel. How many of you have heard of this story? Yeah, every day. And you'll see why it's called Anguru Zumi Nabi Staffel. The story starts out, 4 men, a Persian, a Turk, an Arab, and a Greek, were standing in a village street. They were traveling companions, making for some distant place. But at this moment, they were arguing over the spending of a single piece of money, which was all that they had among them. "I want to buy angur," said the Persian. "I want uzum," said the Turk. "I want inab," said the Arab. "No," said the Greek, "we should buy staffel." Another traveler passing by, a linguist, said, "Give the coin to me. I undertake to satisfy the desires of all of you." At first they would not trust him. Ultimately they let him have the coin. He went to the shop of a fruit seller and bought 4 small bunches of grapes. "This is my angur," said the Persian. "But this is what I call uzum," said the Turk. "You have brought me inab," said the Arab. "No," said the Greek, "this is in my language staffel." The grapes were shared out among them, and each realized that the disharmony had been due to his faulty understanding of the language of others. Okay? And so this is the idea that there is a way of seeing that the linguist was able to understand a universal language behind the forms of these local languages. And so Idris Shah is saying that the Sufi path is very much like that, where we are looking at the hidden essence behind all the appearances or forms, including religion. So religion, like the body, is a framework for developing your abilities. And you could be Buddhist, Muslim, Jew, Christian, Zoroastrian, whatever it is that you find affinity to. You resonate with the symbol system of a certain path, or maybe you're a creature like me, you like many paths. But the idea then is that you don't pay attention so much to the outward form. You don't get lost in the ritual and the appearances of that tradition, but you actually see that it's a vehicle. Religions are vehicles to take you to the beyond shore, to the other side, where you can experience your own immortality, your own true self, the awakening into divine light and divine truth. And so we're going to explore this in some detail through the lens of Vedanta this morning. And I think another story is required because it gives us, again, a nice way of segueing into the Vedantic teachings. And we talked about this a few weeks ago. It's actually also mentioned in Idris Shah, his book that we just read from. The story about the 5 men and the elephant. The 5 blind men all are experiencing the elephant very differently. They're calling it by different names. But that elephant in the story is to symbolize reality. And so every blind person has a certain viewpoint on what is real, what is true, what they believe. And everyone is disagreeing, much like the travelers were disagreeing about the grapes. But they're all referring to the same reality. And if you know the story, you know that the Raja, the king, is sitting there watching the display of the elephant and the blind men, and the Raja is tickled by this. The Raja sees like the Sufi. The Raja understands that behind the appearances and the certain positionalities of focused consciousness, there is a reality that exceeds the scope of any language, any thought system, any form. And so the Raja is aware of the formless nature of reality and therefore can play in the different forms, is a linguist like a Sufi, and can move through the different languages and knows how to connect the dots, that this word means grape in Greek and this word means grape in Turkish. And even though they sound different and look different, behind the symbol is the grape. And so this is where we are training our minds to understand a reality that is beyond our mind, beyond concept, beyond form, beyond language. And so when we come here on a Sunday morning, it's really helpful to dissolve the conceptual constructs that we are often pigeonholed by: our name, our form, our story, our belief system, what we're expecting to hear, what we think of what we're hearing. And it takes a certain positioning or a poise within the mind that allows you to switch channels. And I don't know which class it was. It may have been last week that I mentioned. Yes, it was. Jung's view of the two ways that we can think. So Carl Jung, the great Western psychologist, he said that we can think linearly and logically, obviously, right? And this is something that is very active, and we are pretty much just looking to analyze and compartmentalize and reduce to its most basic constituents so that we can understand it, very much like we do in our scientific belief systems, very analytical. The other way of thinking, which is really required for a conversation like this, and the switching of the channel, is the imaginal, the mythic, according to Jung's terminology, where you're more passive, you're more open, and you actually allow something that you don't know to reach you. So for Jung, it was that the unconscious was a living, breathing world with its own denizens, its own realities. And for Jung, it was that you would become a true or a whole person when you can be in communion with this deeper nature of yourself. And so in order to reach down into this other world, you would have to allow some porousness, some openness, some permeability in your awareness. So this is one of the reasons why we have to break up erroneous perception. In fact, that's what Jesus refers to as miracles in A Course in Miracles. He says miracles are designed to break up erroneous perception so that you can tune in to this deeper reality, which is the Holy Spirit or the higher self within you. So I want to do that with you this morning first, and before we head into any kind of discussion. And what I would ask of you is to prepare yourself in a way that is more passive and open and permeable as you listen to these words that I'm going to read to you from the Ashtavakra Gita, which is a teaching of Vedanta. It translates as the heart of awareness. And we're just going to read a little excerpt from the Ashtavakra Gita. And I want you to maybe close your eyes and take it in as you hear the sound of the bell and listen to the power of the words. And as you're listening to the power of the words, keep in mind that you are using the words as portals, that they are designed to take your consciousness through the symbols and the sounds and into what they are designed to bring you into. Right? Don't stop at the words, go through the words. Let them be doorways into pure consciousness. Just find a slow, rhythmical breath. Relax. And take these words into the most intimate spaces within your awareness. You are pure. Nothing touches you. What is there to renounce? Let it all go. The body and the mind. Let yourself dissolve. Like bubbles in the sea, all the worlds arise in you. Know you are the self. Know you are one. Let yourself dissolve. You see the world, but like the snake in the rope, it is not really there. You are pure. Let yourself dissolve. You are one and the same in joy and sorrow, hope and despair, life and death. You are already fulfilled. Let yourself dissolve. Just continue to find this channel of awareness of more of a passive consciousness, a placid or relaxed mind, where you are feeling more porous and open to within and without. And that you are attuning your awareness or your intention to experiencing the breath of divine consciousness or the presence of God. And it's truly your presence. That's why as we let go of the identity of the false self, the snake that we were superimposing upon the rope dissolves, and we can experience the fact that God is here now, all, in every breath, in every atom, in every perturbation of thought, in every memory, all energy, all atoms and waves and particles, all suns and worlds. There is nothing that is not Him. The rest is our overlay, our ignorance, our projection. Let yourself dissolve. Breathe. It is His breath. And so get a clear feeling of what it's like to be tuned into this consciousness channel of openness and inner communion with the source that is beyond all thought, beyond all form, and yet immediately apparent, and will make itself known to the mind that remembers it is pure. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So we want to go further into this idea of dissolving or letting go or renouncing. In fact, this idea of renouncing, if we were to look through the lens of Vedic India and Hinduism, the idea of sannyas is the Sanskrit word for renunciation. And it's part of the stages of life that all human beings were designed to go through if you're living according to the Shastras or the ancient scriptures of Hinduism. So you go through stages of being a student, and then you go through stages of being a householder and a family person, raising kids and setting them on their way in life. And then you go into more of a focused retirement where you begin to ask these deeper questions. Who am I? What's the nature of reality? What's it all about? And then eventually you reach the final stage of sannyas. You reach the stage of renouncing the world. But there's something that needs to be brought out, teased out in this understanding of renunciation. And I'm using Sri Aurobindo's brilliant insight to do that. This is his commentary on the Isha Upanishad, one of the teachings of Vedanta. And this is what Sri Aurobindo says. Real integral enjoyment of all this creation, this movement, this multiplicity in its truth and in its infinity depends upon absolute renunciation. So here's the paradox. You can't enjoy life. You can't enjoy the world of multiplicity and all of the arisings that are happening within nature if you're overlaying it with your egoic projections. You just can't see that the bliss and the divinity are right here in everything and everyone, because we're coming from a place of disconnectedness, neediness, ignorance, and lostness. And when the mind is in this unstable place and it's disoriented as to its true self, it will project another reality. And this idea of the snake and the rope, it's familiar to many of us, but let's just point it out in a more clear way. In the Vedantic teachings, this notion of the snake and the rope is often used as what we are doing when we are deluding ourselves with the ego thought system. That a man is walking home at twilight or dusk, and up ahead on the road, especially if you're in India, this becomes more of a lived reality. He thinks he sees a snake, and he jumps out of fear because the snake is very close by the time he gets up to it because the light is so dim. And he's sure it's a snake. And when he goes home, he tells his friend goes back out there with a stick, and lo and behold, it was a rope upon closer inspection. And so what the sages of the Vedanta are saying is we are often putting our own views, our own projections, our own fears onto what's there. And it really has nothing to do with what's really there. The snake is a figment of one's imagination or a projection of one's fear. But because one believes it, one sees it. And so there's no arguing with that individual who immediately sends that reptilian brain into full force and leaps out of the way because that snake is real in that moment to that mind. It doesn't see it as a projection. And so this is what we're supposedly doing when we're under the influence of ignorance, that we are not really seeing what's here. We're seeing what we think is here. Hence the need to renounce. Renunciation isn't a movement towards lack. Renunciation is an opening towards abundance. What's being renounced is our fear-based projections. Our identity, our worldview, our belief system is what we are using to create our reality. But it's all based within a separate, isolated point of view. And that is not what is the self. Remember, you are pure. You are the self in the heart of all beings. All the worlds, as we just read from the Ashtavakra Gita, all the worlds arise within you. You are beyond abundant. You are the light of God. You are the love of God. What's keeping us from knowing this about ourselves is our fear-based, egoistic projections. Renounce those. Dissolve. And as you dissolve, you'll realize that the only terror is the ego going through its dissolution. Not you. You're forever calm in hope and despair, life and death. You don't move. You're the pure awareness. You've never not been this light of awareness, this Ashtavakra. But because we're under a delusory belief system, we are identifying this pure awareness with the body and with this isolated point of view, like the blind man holding on to just a little bit of the elephant, thinking he knows everything. And what happens when you meet other blind people? The story tells you. You get really pissed off at them because they're not agreeing to your version of reality. So this is why we have to be in a very special place to come here on a Sunday morning, because most people want to still root for their team. I am team Buddhist. I am team Christian. I am team Catholic. I am team Protestant. And when you're in these places where you're more focused on the form, you will never go beyond to the place where the masters of those traditions were speaking from. It takes something. It takes great courage to renounce, because we are identified as our belief system. And if somebody comes along and, like the Raja, who knows that there is a hidden language behind all of these belief systems and gives you a little indicator that this thought that you're having is a limited perspective on reality, oftentimes when we're not ready, we take offense and defend our point of view. We fight for it. We try to protect the little mask of the ego. And when you're in that place, you're not ready for the path of initiation, because the path of initiation begins with renunciation. So the renunciation, as we were saying, is the ultimate paradox, because once you're done defending your little point of view, you'll begin to realize that it never gave you what you wanted in the first place. It was a mirage, like that snake overlaid on the rope. So too is your happiness, like a mirage. You thought you got it, but it never really showed up to reach and scratch that inner itch or that inner need that's so deep down that only the mind of God can alleviate. So this idea of renouncing your illusions, I want to make clear, in no way is a sacrifice. Renouncing illusions, as Sri Aurobindo is telling us, is the path towards true enjoyment, true sukha, sweetness. So he's saying here, it must be an absolute renunciation, very much like Jesus says in A Course in Miracles. You must accept the atonement unequivocally, without any deviation, because the slightest deviation in your intention keeps one illusion alive in your mind as a possibility for your separate self to get what it thinks it can get from the objects or forms in the world. So nobody's punishing the person who chooses that. The person's punishing themselves because they're delaying their true enjoyment. So this is all an inside job. In these higher teachings of the esoteric traditions that we're discussing here, there's no outside influence punishing you or giving you a fate that is just your lot in life that you have to suffer through. This is all being generated moment by moment by your past efforts and by your present efforts. As it says in the Yoga Vashishta, your present effort brought you here. What you do now is your primary choice to either continue on in the course that you've been going, or you can alter it in any number of ways by your effort now, your decision now. So if you want to renounce now, there's nothing holding you back except yourself. So he says here, the renunciation intended is an absolute renunciation of the principle of desire, founded on the principle of egoism. And it is not a renunciation of world existence. Remember, it ends in enjoyment. Just a renunciation of the limited desire of the ego. This solution depends on the idea that desire is only an egoistic and vital deformation of the divine ananda, or delight of being, from which the world is born. By extirpation of ego and desire, ananda, or bliss, again becomes the conscious principle of existence in your awareness. This substitution is the essence of the change from life in death to life in immortality. Did you get that? Very powerful statement. This substitution of the ego's desire for God's will, or ananda, the divine bliss, when you give up your little personal desire and open to the desire of God, it is the substitution that changes your experience from having a life set within the context of dying things to having your awareness translated into life set within immortality. And nothing changes out there. Like, you can do this right here and nobody else would see it except one who has undergone that process themselves. Like Sri Ramakrishna said, only a hemp smoker can recognize another hemp smoker. So when you've translated into the land of immortality, nothing within the vehicular body realm changes. You change your platform of consciousness, and enjoyment replaces desire. Now, keep in mind, as I often say, let all of this keep brewing in you. I'm not force-feeding you anything. You don't have to believe this. And look at it with your own discernment. And then at the end of our service, we'll field any questions, comments, or pushbacks. But there is one other thing that I wanted to mention from Sri Aurobindo, and it's this idea of being and becoming. All right, so he says everything depends on what we see, how we look at existence. Right? That's what's your experience. Your experience depends on how you're looking at it. Nobody's doing anything to you. You're making these internal choices and then seeing whether it's a rope or a snake, whether it's the tail of the elephant or the ear of the elephant. You're choosing, you're selecting what is real for you. Right? So how you look at it determines what it is for you. He says, being and becoming, one and many, are both true and are both the same thing. So this is where, again, when we get into the heart of God, there's nothing that isn't God. God is all in all. We were mistaking the rope for the snake, but the rope is there. The multiplicity is here. You don't leave the world when you renounce the world. You leave your fragmented ego, and the world becomes the body of God. This is what Sri Aurobindo is saying based on the Upanishad. He says, being is one, becomings are many, but this simply means that all becomings are one being who places himself variously in the phenomenal movement of his consciousness. We have to see the one being, but we have not to cease to see the many becomings, for they exist and are included in God's view of himself. Only we must see with knowledge and not with ignorance. We have to realize our true self as the one unchangeable, indivisible God. We have to see all becomings as developments of the movement in our true self, right? Maturation process happening here in the multiplicity. Spiritual evolution happening here in the multiplicity. So everything that we are looking at in the movement is the true self, and this self inhabiting all bodies and not our body only. We have to be consciously in our relations with this world what we really are. This one self becoming everything that we observe. All the movement, all the energies, all forms, all happenings, we must see as those of our one and real self in many existences. As the play of the will and knowledge and delight of the Lord in his world existence. And then finally he says, we shall then be delivered from egoism and desire and the sense of separate existence, and therefore from all grief and delusion and shrinking. For all grief is born of the shrinking of the ego from the contacts of existence, its sense of fear, weakness, want, dislike, etc. And this is born from the delusion of separate existence, the sense of being my separate ego exposed to all these contacts of so much that is not myself. Get rid of this. See oneness everywhere. Be the one manifesting himself in all creatures. Ego will disappear. Desire born of the sense of not being this, not having that, will disappear. The free, inalienable delight of the one in his own existence will take the place of desire and its satisfactions and dissatisfactions. Immortality will be yours. Death born of division will be overcome. So, again, to make this practical and experiential, he's saying that our desire with its satisfactions and dissatisfactions are acting as a veil that is keeping us from the bliss and the enjoyment of what this present moment truly holds for us. Right? So you can see why Jesus says in the gospel, this path is very narrow, and few choose to go down it. The path that leads to death is very wide, and many go in that direction, because we are either realizing that we have to renounce our identity as the body and take this narrow road of self-initiation, and realize that by dissolving and renouncing our desires, that we will actually find true enjoyment. Who wants that? Hopefully you do, because you can see beyond the appearances. And this is where true wisdom begins to dawn in the awareness. Wisdom sees that the realm of form will never satisfy. It will never give you what you're looking for. It's dream. It's mirage. And so the awakening process, as we've been saying, happens when you're ready for it. But first, usually, what comes is, in the Vedanta, this state of what's called dispassion. When you've reached a breaking point or a sense of futility with the things of the world. If everything's going really well for you in the world, you have enough money, you have a lot of relationships, you're traveling, there's a lot of distractions and sensual pleasure and enjoyment, oftentimes you're never going to want to turn towards that path of inner scrutiny and renunciation. Who would want that? Sometimes we've had that experience of being really fulfilled at a certain time in our life, lots of money, lots of friends, great family, great food, great trips, all of that, and then all of a sudden it goes away. And we're sometimes left feeling, what did I do wrong? Or who did me wrong? Or why is life so cruel? And if we were to actually look with wisdom, not through the eyes of appearance, but wisdom, we would see this is actually grace. That the fact that all of my distractions have been taken away, family members die, friends leave me, divorce sets in, I don't have as much money and free time as I used to indulge my senses and travel, etc., that I have to actually make a really hard existential choice right now. Do I want to wake up? Or do I want to try to find enjoyment in the world? Well, oftentimes that road gets cut off. One way or another, you have to come to a place of seeing that the world doesn't offer you freedom. It offers you bondage. It doesn't offer you happiness. It offers you pain. It takes some time often, even when we're on the spiritual path, to make that a true commitment. Okay? So that's where we're going next in our happy story. This idea of dispassion. This idea of being sick and tired of the world because you begin to see the world for what it really is, right? You're not overlaying it, not with the snake, but with the pleasure garden or the dancing girls or the Chippendale guys, I don't know. You're not projecting on it your egoistic desires. You're actually taking away your projections and really seeing the world for what it is. Again, that takes a more mature mind. Little children can't do and won't do that. Little children still want to indulge the senses. They want to go to Pleasure Island. They want to stay in the realm of projecting their desire. Right? So, speaking of little children, this is the Yoga Vasishta. It's a story that's been traditionally associated to the sage Valmiki. And Valmiki, if you don't know, wrote the Ramayana, which is one of the great Hindu epics of India. So there's the Mahabharata, the great epic where the Bhagavad Gita is in the Mahabharata. Am I saying too many vowels and foreign words for you right now? But you know the Bhagavad Gita, the teachings of Sri Krishna. That's within the first great epic of India. The Ramayana is the story of Rama. And Rama and Sita are the husband and wife that feature in the Ramayana. And Rama is considered an incarnation of Vishnu. And what's really interesting about Hindu lore is that they have a history or a timeline that goes way back. Like we oftentimes maybe will tune into Graham Hancock on Netflix or John Anthony West or Robert Schoch or these guys that are kind of uncovering the lost civilizations that were Atlantis or Lemuria, things that preceded, the earliest civilizations of our recorded history, the time of the gods, right, as the Egyptians called it, Zep-Tepi. Well, the Hindu lore goes way back, even before what these avant-garde researchers are saying. So according to Hindu tradition, the Ramayana took place about 30,000 years BCE. So 30,000 years before Christ. And so Rama, in this story, it takes place in the Yoga Vasishta before the events of the Ramayana. So Rama is only 16 years old here, still an incarnation of God, born in the kingdom. His father is the king Dasharatha, and he's born in the kingdom of Ayodhya, which means no conflict. So under a just king. Now, remember what we talked about in the story of the blind man and the elephant, is that there is this Raja, this king, that sees beyond the limiting positionalities of egoic consciousness that's trying to understand reality from a singular thought system, body identity. Raja Vidya is what is being taught by the sage Vashishta, which is the knowledge of the Raja. So in other words, why is the Raja there, able to laugh, seeing beyond the limited frameworks and seeing that the elephant itself isn't even the totality of reality, the physical universe? It's because he's an initiate of the Raja Vidya, the Raja Yoga, the royal science. And so in order to have this royal science brought to him, Rama in the story first undergoes chapter 1. Chapter 1 is literally entitled Dispassion. Rama is 16. He goes off as a young royal, visiting all the shrines and goes on the sacred pilgrimage. And when he comes back, he's changed. Something happened to Rama's consciousness where he doesn't want to eat, he doesn't want to bathe, he doesn't comb his hair, the dancing girls ain't doing it for him anymore, doesn't want to leave the inner rooms of his apartment, no desire to dress or wear the jewels of the crown. And he's in a place of being completely renounced in his heart. He's saddened by the way that the world is. And it's brought to the attention of his father, and his father asks Rama to come to the court, and in the court you have the sage Vashishta, and Rama is telling his father and the sage why he is in such a state. And he's saying that when he really looks at life as we are living it, he sees that nothing will last. Everything has a birth, a shelf life, and a death. And craving, and the body, and childhood, and youth, and old age, they never really seem to bring the satisfaction to this inner aching need. So by the end of his recounting, this is what Rama says. All beings in this world are tainted with evil. All relationships are bondage. All enjoyments are great diseases. And desire for happiness is only a mirage. One's own senses are one's enemies. The reality has become unreal or unknown. One's own mind has become one's worst enemy. Egotism is the foremost cause for evil. Wisdom is weak. All actions lead to unpleasantness, and pleasure is sexually oriented. One's intelligence is governed by egotism instead of being the other way around. Hence, there is no peace nor happiness in one's mind. Youth is fading. Company of holy ones is rare. There's no way out of this suffering. The realization of truth is not to be seen in anyone. No one is happy at the prosperity and happiness of others, nor is compassion to be found in anyone's heart. People are getting baser and baser by the day. Weakness has overcome strength. Cowardice has overpowered courage. Evil company is easily had. Good company is hard to come by. I wonder whether time is driving humanity. Sounds like he needs Tony Robbins. So he goes on, he says, this mysterious being seems to dwell in all. Listen to this now. And its individualized aspect is regarded as egotism. and there is nothing that is not destroyed by it. The entire universe is under its control, and its will alone prevails here. So he's saying there's one ego, and it's like the divine taking many forms in the minds that allow it. And it drives these minds that are essentially pure into impure states. And it brings them from immortality to death, from enjoyment or ananda into pain. And so this egotism, which is a mind virus, if you will, is where the Vedanta and all the Raja Vidya, all the sacred sciences, point you. Because it's what we're projecting with. That's how subtle this is. You're projecting from egotism, or you're dissolving egotism and you're extending from your pure self. There's no other way of experiencing life other than those two expressions. Hence the need to wake up from your disease of egotism. This is what Vedanta has prescribed. This is how it's diagnosed the existential situation. There's nobody else doing it. It is this egoic identity that we are hypnotized by and producing our reality from. That's why we suffer. We're not suffering because of him or her or that president or this one. It's our projection. So Rama goes on. He says, O sage, thus neither in childhood, nor in youth, nor in old age does one enjoy any happiness. None of the objects in this world is meant to give happiness to anyone. Right? Can never satisfy the desires of the ego. As it says in the Gita, your desire burns like fire. The more you feed your desire, the stronger or brighter the fire gets. The desire is never slacked. So the ego just craves more. We see it. We see it individually, but we see it within our capitalistic consumer society. It's always more. Even if we're destroying the environment and destroying the planet, we still have to, I went to the Apple store the other day and I had my MacBook there. It works perfectly, but because it's 7 years old, I can't get a new battery for it. They don't cover it anymore. So it's got to go on the trash heap. Even though it's perfect, it was made to break. So I would have to buy another one. More. So this identity is egoistic, and we're doing this as an individual, and we're doing this collectively. And it's harmful. It is harmful to all of life. And happiness is not found therein. And then Rama says, only he is happy who is free from egotism and who is not swayed by craving for sense pleasure. But such a person is extremely rare in this world. Indeed, I do not regard him as a hero who is able to battle successfully against a mighty army. Only him I consider a hero who is able to cross the ocean known as the mind and the senses. It's a heroic journey inward. That is the hero's journey, right? Oh boy. So then he says that this dispassion has helped him extinguish his desire for the sense pleasures. And as a result, he's now ready for this higher wisdom to dawn in his mind. He says, tell me, do you people who are enlightened live in this world? How can the mind be freed from lust and made to view the world both as one's own self and also as no more valuable than a blade of grass? Obviously, there is a secret that enables one to remain unaffected by the grief and suffering in this world, even as mercury is not affected when it is thrown into the fire. What is that secret? What is the secret that counteracts the habit of the mind that is spread out in the form of the universe? Now, I might have to pick up the whole teaching on the Raja Vidya next week. If you're interested, come back, because I want to just hover on this one last point, and then we have to bring it to a close. But look at what he's saying. We leave Rama with this open mind, this willingness to learn something that he doesn't know already. What's the secret? I need to know, because everything I know brings me grief. And, he says, what is the secret that counteracts the habit of the mind that is spread out in the form of the universe? So this is what's trippy. We, under the delusion of egoism, think we're circumscribed by the skin. What these sages have realized is that you're living in your mind. Your mind is the inner and the outer. Your mind is spread out as the universe. That's how vast you are. That'll never change. All that changes is how you're focusing. You'll still live in the entirety of your mind, but you'll actually wake up to see that everything is yourself. The whole universe is an expression of your deepest self. Right? But right now, we're in the habit of the mind that is fragmented and trying to get enjoyment through lust and desire, possession of objects and people. And it's really your own mind energy. So you'll never be satisfied, because it's all a projection already. There's no substance there. It's a mirage. So the ego is playing this trick on your mind as long as you're willing. It distorts your non-dual nature, your vast self, and makes you think that you're not who you are, and you're the little me. And you can get stuff and do stuff to people who aren't you so that you can be happy. And it doesn't work, because it isn't true. So we'll leave it there. Blue bag will go around. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. If you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, remember you can click the link below and donate to the 8 a.m. service. We thank you very much for your contribution and your support. We bless the offering. We charge it with the intention that it be used to bring light and love into the hearts and minds of all it touches. And so it is. Amen. Any thoughts? Final few minutes here, a couple minutes? Oh, George, I didn't see your hand. There it is. There is what? There is no separation. Just the habit. So the practice is undoing the habit by desiring the unity more than the separation. Right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, my friends, we'll bring it to a close. Just find that quiet place again where we can dissolve all of the images within the mind and become once again this passive recipient to the inflow of divine grace. And as we rest in the grace of the present moment, we are in the light of God. So we know that the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Thank you for being here. Tomorrow night, join us for our Course in Miracles at 7:15 p.m. And if you're interested, we have a Seth group coming up. That begins May 16th. Seth material is very helpful in opening up this higher knowledge, so see me afterwards or shoot me an email if you're interested in signing up for that class. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.